On episode 308 of the Tennis Files podcast, you'll learn how to use data to win more matches with Coach Marc Sophoulis. Hey there, I hope you're having a great day and are improving your tennis game. And on today's episode, we have an interview with Coach Marc Sophoulis, who, if you're a fan of the podcast or my summits, I'm sure you've heard before. He's an excellent coach. He is the head coach at the Melbourne International Tennis School in Melbourne, Australia. He has coached many pros, including Anastasia Rodionova, Dane Propogia, and Victor Hanescu, among many others. Marc has also spoken at conferences around the world and has been a commentator for professional tennis matches. And Marc is also the director and head coach of the Tennis Menu, which is a fantastic instructional tennis site, which you should check out. Links to the Tennis Menu are below this episode's show notes. So definitely go there, go to thetennismenu.com. And today, Marc is going to talk about the most important data points that you can use to transform the way that you practice and play matches. So it's all about figuring out, the data, and then, the most important points there. And then from there, you can formulate how you practice and you can formulate your strategy and things like that. So this will definitely be a very helpful episode for you if you would like to improve your strategy and improve the way you train. So without further ado, here is my interview with Coach Marc Sophoulis. So obviously, the title has data in it, super interesting. And it's something that I think the tennis world is certainly lagged in comparison to other sports, like golf and baseball, for example. So just kind of to set the stage, why is data so important to tennis and what is the impact of that?
I think data in particular is important as it's factual information. And I think, when we think data, we think purely numbers, but data to me is vision. It's numbers, it's facts, it's not opinion. And, when I first started, I was working in Australian football in 2007 was the first time I actually saw data being used. And I'd never really seen it in tennis at that time. And that kind of sort of stimulated some thought in me, in that I thought, well, hang on, they're using this to construct their own training sessions as well as game plans, as well as measurements for improvement for their athletes. Why aren't we doing this in tennis? So I thought that was the starting point. I thought, gee, we're a long way behind. If we haven't even started and they've been doing this for a long period of time, why haven't we started? So I think it's important because it shows you and it gives you, like I said, the factual information that you can work from, and then gives you measurement tools to be able to continually measure your progress from where you were to where you are now. And that to me is important in development of athletes, from a coaching standpoint, to sell a story to people. Because sometimes you kind of think, you've got a player in front of you and you say to them, you're improving, but their losses are, happening too frequently, and they're kind of saying to you, well, I'm not improving. But you measure from an analytical standpoint, and it shows them the improvement in maybe first serve percentage or first serve points won, or using their weapon a little bit more to create some forced errors from the opponent. And then they start to see the measurement being used, and they think to themselves, well, they're the things we've been working on. Yeah, maybe I am improving. So it can kind of sell the story and create a really good story for a coach to be able to tell their athlete. And so it is important in so many aspects of the game. And I'm sure we'll touch on all the different ways of doing that as we go along.
Yeah, definitely, Marc. And it's very, smart of you and sage that you, when you saw the data in a different context in 2007, that you thought about, why aren't we using it? So, in terms of types of data, I mean, obviously, we got the strategy, technique, fitness, mental game, etc. I was wondering, which ones of those have you been kind of focusing on, or have you just been looking at data for all that stuff? What have you been looking at lately?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with data is, what am I going to use it for? So it's important that when you capture data, it's used in the way that it needs to be used. So, for example, I have a great data scientist that I work with, and I'll give him a pump up. But data-driven sports analytics, Shane Leonage, and we work together now for a long period of time. And Shane is the data analyst for On Jabeur and Arena Sabalenka, just to name a couple of incredible athletes he's working with. And Shane and I started working together about probably 7 or 8 years ago now. And what we've done is he's come up with a lot of data around shot loadings, for example. So how many shots are hit per match on average, to give me an idea of what kind of loads I need to put into my athletes to reduce injury. So we always talk about overload, we talk about underload injuries, but what does that actually mean unless you've got the data? So in particular, so you've got on the men's tour and the ATP tour, men are averaging 85.96 serves per match. The women are averaging 69.66. So you get a number like that and you think to yourself, well, what am I going to do with it? So for me, it's around how much am I loading my athletes in training so that therefore when they go to the match, their bodies are able to sustain the level for as long as they need to. Now, you're not hitting those 85 or 69 serves all at once either. You're doing serving, returning. So it can help you to structure your session to enable you to be more match specific and match like in terms of the way you go about your training sessions. A number, for example, like the 631 shots hit per match on the men's tour on average, and on the women's tour, 530. So am I simulating enough balls being struck by my players that are going to allow their bodies to physically enable the rigors of the game? So from a developmental standpoint, I think it's important to understand those kind of numbers. Yes, they're generic. Yes, they're averages and they're not specifics. And everyone has their own game style. So Ivo Karlovic, who serve and volleys and probably doesn't rally more than 2 or 3 balls, is going to be very different to a Diego Schwartzman, for example. So the individualism will come into it as we go along, but I think having the ability to understand loads of shot actually helps me to design a training session that all of my athletes can then go into tournaments and matches and be able to sustain and withstand that, the physical nature of our game, which is incredible. Like when you think of, a team sport, and, I coach in the Australian Football League, and for us, a player may touch the ball 15, 20, 30 times per game. Now, we play once a week. So in that 1 week of match-orientated situations, they're touching the ball at most 30 times. Now, as a tennis player, we're hitting 631 shots per match. We may have to play 6 matches in 1 week, day after day. So our body is having to withstand so much physical strain that we need to be able to give our players the best chance of survival. It's a very survival-based sport, in inverted commas. So the shot loadings for me are probably some of the most critical, and are even to the point of, I know Craig O'Shaughnessy is big on the all-ball kind of point situations. Now, on the women's tour, 63% of points finish under 4 shots. On the men's tour, 66% finish under 4 shots. Now, that doesn't mean that we just practice the 4 shots, but that gives you an idea of how our sport is quite short, sharp, and powerful. So, when you're training as a tennis athlete, everything should be based around, okay, how do I set my serve up to get the first ball as a first strike? Where do I put my return to get the first strike in the rally? So you use the numbers to be able to direct and guide your training sessions, and also to tell you what the game is currently doing. And that is, I guess, from a coaching standpoint, from a player's will be different. From a coaching standpoint, if I don't maintain my ability to stay in touch with the game, then I'm not developing my players for what they've got to come. So I need to stay in touch with the latest information and data. And that kind of is, for me at the moment in the area I'm coaching in junior development a lot more of the time rather than the pro level, it is critical for me to understand what the game is doing and where the game is going. So the numbers give me those factual bits of information. So to answer your question, I think, when we use how I'm using data is in that space at the moment from a developmental standpoint. And I guess the other part that I do use it for is measuring progress. So when we talk about technique, and I know you mentioned the word technique, tennis coaches gravitate to the word technique and gravitate to technical aspects of the game. And because they gravitate to that, all of the players are doing the same. So it was like, you ask a question to an athlete, what did you do in that situation? Why did you miss that ball? And they'll gravitate to the fact that they didn't hit enough topspin, or their racket didn't go back early enough, or their left arm positioning wasn't across the body. So they gravitate to the technical side of the game. And that is important. but not as important as what the game actually asks you to do. So where should that shot have gone? How should you have played the shot there? What would you do next time you play that shot? So if we think data based on technique, we're thinking of visual stimulation. So we'll look at video analysis, we'll break it down, we'll draw lines. But a lot of the time, a lot of the reasons why we don't actually have success on the tennis court is not because of our technical side of the game. It's actually because of our decision-making and shot selection more often than not. No matter what level you play at, your technique is determined by your intent. And your intent is around where you're trying to play, how you're trying to play it there, and why you're trying to play it there. So they're kind of the different aspects of data at the moment that I think are critical to the development of our players.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. I think, so, I mean, is it as simple as the concept of mirroring? So like, let's say, we see that, we're hitting usually hitting 70% forehands in a match, 30% backhand, just for example. I mean, does that mean that we, when we're practicing, we should mirror that, or is there more to the story as well?
Oh, I think it's a great idea. We had there's a story of a player I was coaching a little while back, and I'll probably keep his name close to my chest, but he's sort of sitting around the inside the 250 in the world mark at the moment. And some of the data we came up with for him was every time he hit 3 forehands in a point, he won the point 95% of the time. So some of the training that we had to then mirror was, okay, well, how do we get that situation more often? Where do we need to play the forehand to get that happening a lot more? And it's not just a matter of just hitting the forehand. It's actually where we're hitting it from and where we're hitting it to. So that's probably the layers of the story that probably need to occur as well is, you could hit a forehand and you could be totally out of position to play it and it might not have the same effect. So, we had to work out, yes, the 3 forehands were important, but where were those forehands going? And then how are we setting up the point? So for this particular player, we found that the 2 of the forehands had to be from the ad side of the court. So we had to set the game up. So the first forehand would probably go up the line if we possibly could from the juice side to shift the game back to the ad side of the court in terms of our recovery position, and then utilize that forehand from the ad side of the court. So that's kind of the layers of the data that I think is very critical to understand as well. So you're right. The data gives us an ability to understand what we are doing, but how we utilize that's also important. So your data might say that you're missing more backhands than you are forehands. Does that mean you should practice more backhands because your backhand isn't working? Well, possibly not. It might mean that what you are doing with the previous ball is setting up the wrong situation for the backhand. It might mean that you are getting stuck in the backhand rally too often. It might mean that you're playing the backhand to the wrong shot on the court. So there's a little bit of a story behind the numbers. And a lot of the time when you see numbers, you've got to understand the reason behind them. There's no point saying, oh, I made 50 unforced errors. I've just got to keep the ball in the court longer. Because it might not be that is the reason why you made 50 unforced errors. So, there's a lot of digging that needs to happen. And a lot of that comes down to, so a really big part of how I go about it is we get the data, but I also record every match that they play. So it's recording the match and keeping the match to understand the reason behind all the numbers. And that gives us a bit of an idea of how to shape training a little bit more.
Gotcha. Very interesting. And I really enjoyed the, how you went into, the professional player and how you're trying to set up more forehands. I mean, that's what I try to do as well. I mean, a lot of players would like that, to be able to hit more forehands. So was that very specific to his case where he would, hit one down the line and then, have his forehand set up to hit at least a few more, since he can hit, inside outs and whatnot? Or is that a general strategy that you think a lot of us maybe should be using even at club level?
Look, it's interesting, and I'll try and explain this as best I possibly can, as clear as I can to give your audience a bit of an idea. So if you think about the court, and I'm on the juice side of the court. Now, if I'm on the juice side of the court, and I play a ball cross court to the juice side of the court on the other side of the court, basically now, because my recovery position is going to be on the right of center, so I'm going to be roughly about 1 meter off the center, because when you play a cross court ball, your recovery position will still be in that same zone. I now have a less chance of hitting a forehand on the next ball because there's so much more space to get to my backhand. So in his situation, it was a matter of going, okay, well, how can I set the court up to enable me to have more space to hit a forehand? Now, by going down the line, the ball then, or the recovery position is on the ad side of the court. And when I'm on the ad side of the court, I now have roughly about a 65 to 70% chance of playing a forehand. So that's how I kind of thought of it in that situation. The second part of that and the layers behind that is the grip that people hold. Now, if you have more semi-Western to Western based grips, your court position for your forehand, and you're better off playing from a court position standpoint from the ad side, because of your Western and semi-Western grip to play inside out of the ball is a little bit easier than getting across the ball with your Western grip. But with an Eastern grip, it's probably a little easier to be on the juice side of the court because you actually can take time away. You don't have to actually get around the ball. You can actually hit flat through the line and change direction at any time. So it's kind of a different ball game, and it all depends on what grip you hold and what your obviously your strategy is. And if you want to hit more forehands, you want to try and get to whichever side of the court you need to be able to do that. But for this player in particular, we needed him on the ad side to maximize the potential of playing more forehand. So everyone can use that strategy, and anyone can use that strategy if that's the way you want to go about it. But I think the court position standpoint is probably the most important to understand, because if you can understand where your court positions are after each ball, you'll understand what the possibilities are of which shot you are going to play next more likely. So, it's very easy to get to your backhand if you position yourself on the juice side. So your opponent can really expose your backhand side down the line if that happens. So I always encourage, be the first one to change that direction if you can. Don't get stuck in the cross rally. Make sure you're the one that dictates the down the line ball to ensure that you have strike in the rally and you have the ascendancy in the point.
Love that. And just another, a question about like underloading, I guess, maybe to dive into that deeper. So like in what, how do you use underloading, relative to data, and then, like in your training and whatnot?
Yeah. So I'll give you a little story of some of our players. So some of our academy players were getting overuse injuries a lot. And we did some research on it, and it was interesting. We GPSed all of our players. So we put a tracking device on all our players. We counted every ball they played in practice. We understood what the loadings were. We tracked their weekly loads compared to match loads. And what we were finding was that our players were actually hitting significantly less balls in training than they were in a match on any one day. And if you think of some of the tournament schedules or competition that we generally play, you might play 2 matches in a day, sometimes 3, depending on which tournament, which competition you play, whether it's a doubles comp, you play 3 in a day, whether you're playing doubles and singles, whether you play 2 rounds in a day. So what was happening was, and generally underload comes with a spike in loading. So what was happening was they had this low level of loading, and then they'd play a tournament and the spike would go up. And then because of the spike, we'd get these overload injuries from the tournament. So then we thought of, okay, well, how do we load our players enough so they're not getting underloading injuries from overloading in a match? So we had to load them gradually. Obviously, you don't want to go from hitting once a week to 15 times a week, just for the sake of getting your loadings right. But we had to gradually start to load them a little bit more leading up to events, to ensure that when they got to the event, there wasn't a spike in the load. So we had to change the protocols around our weekly progress and our termly progressions of loading, and gradually increase it so they weren't getting to a tournament having a massive spike. So we saw a significant decrease in injury from that, which was really good because it was happening too often and too frequently. So, data was able to lead us to that conclusion, which actually now is starting to settle down a lot of our players' injury standpoints as well.
Awesome, Mark. And so how do you use data to help like dissect opponents? Obviously, like when we're trying to formulate a game plan, like we think about our strengths and weaknesses, but then also it's so helpful to think about our opponent's strengths and weaknesses. So how do you use data against your opponents?
It's a really good question. It's something that I'm grateful to have Shane from Data Driven Sports Analytics. He's obviously my ally in this field, and he's been doing this for a period of time that and had some great success. So generally, we look at a player, it could be an upcoming player, and he might send me all the vision. So from a data standpoint, the coach gets the vision, and then the data analyst sends us all these raw numbers. Now, Shane would send me pages upon pages of raw numbers of, the amount of times the opposition player serves to a certain spot and their win ratios, what they do on big points, which side of the court they generally like to play from, which shot breaks down from which side of the court, where the return positions go on first and second serve. A lot of different data on that. But before that, I'll watch the match and come up with my own opinions as to what I'm seeing. Then we try and marry up the eyes and the data together, and then we create a plan based upon that. So what the way I like to do it, and this is just a personal preference, and then everybody has their own way, I dissect the game into 3 areas. The first one is, what am I doing on my serve and +1? What am I doing on my return and +1? And then what do I do when the ball is live after those first 4 shots? So there's three parts of the game. And then I dissect the opponent in those 3 areas. What do they do on serve +1, return +1, and when the ball is in play? So I can understand the kind of style of play that the opponent wants to play, and then the kind of style of play that I need my player to play. Now, you can look at it in different ways. From a coaching standpoint, I could look at it from, well, I think my player's strengths are better than the opponent, so we're going to play to our strengths a lot more. If I feel like the players are quite even, I might be able to try and expose the opponent in different ways. So look at, how do I use my player's strengths to dissect the opponent's weaknesses? Now, most of the time, though, and I think on this tennis files before, we've spoken about the 80-20 rule. And we spoke about 80% of what we do on match day is what we can control. So that's our game plan versus 20% of how we break down the opponent. So, for example, I'll give you a story. Rafael Nadal, his best plays are his slice serve and his forehand first ball. Okay, so he's obviously wants to dominate the court with his runaround forehand. He wants to plant himself in the juice side of the court, use his forehand as much as possible. Now, because he plays Novak Djokovic, who might be able to match him from the back of the court, that doesn't mean Nadal now says, okay, I'll serve and volley every point because that's the only way to beat Novak. Now, that's not the case. He'll still play to his strengths, but then try and expose Novak in different ways, right? So that's just a slight example. You won't change your whole game plan based upon what the opponent can or can't do. You still want to play to your strengths as much as possible. So when we dissect matches, we're looking for small areas that can be exposed rather than major things that will change the whole context of the game, right? So I think it's an important one to look at, especially, when you go out to your local competition, you might not have the data based on your opponent. So you might have to think about, okay, well, the warm-up is the best opportunity, plus the first 4 games might be the best opportunity to be able to find out what my player can or can't do. What kind of grips do they hold? What kind of stances do they have? How can I expose those things? If they've got Eastern grips, here's a little tip for your audience, mate. So this is from a playbook that I don't give away too often. So Eastern grips require closed stances more often than not. So when you play an Eastern grip player, what you want to do is 2 things. One, either spread them wide and take them out of that closed stance situation to play them in an open stance, or slow the ball down and hit higher. Get them above shoulder level so they have to generate their own speed from above shoulder level. 2 things. You play a Western grip player or a semi-Western grip player. Speed the game up and give them no width. Okay, really importantly, because a Western grip player wants time and space. Take away time and space. Take away the width. Take away the time. Okay, there's a little tip. So if you're thinking of your local competition levels or your anything that you play tournament-wise and you don't have the data based on the opponent, think of how can I expose them in different ways, maybe technically, first and foremost, but also always remember, what am I really good at, and stick to that more often than not. Okay, stick to that first and then try and expose them in little ways afterwards.
Awesome. Love those tips. Definitely very accurate ones in my experience. Unfortunately against me. But yeah, awesome. Love that. And we did also kind of speak before the recording about the importance of where the art meets the science. So maybe to touch upon that and reiterate it for the audience as well.
Yeah, and it's obviously an important one. And Shane and I, my trusty data analyst, we have this I guess, little funny debate all the time around what's more important, the art or the science. And obviously he's the science guy and I'm the art guy. And I have no idea about science and he has no idea about art. So we kind of debate this all the time. But, hopefully he doesn't listen to this conversation because he might get a little bit of a big head. But I've come to the conclusion that we're driven by science, which is our numbers and our vision, but we construct everything through art. So we're kind of an artist that can paint our own picture and we're like a Picasso, but we need to understand what we are trying to draw first before we do that. So we need an image in our head. We need the science. We need the vision. We need the statistical information that gives us the facts to be able to then draw and create with our imagination. So if I can sort of summarize it in that, it's, I think from a coaching standpoint, I always give the advice to coaches that it's where art meets science. And that's where you really get the benefit of what the data is. It's not just pure numbers and it's not just pure opinion. It's the ability to go, my eyes see this, but the facts are this, and I bring them together. And if we can find that sweet spot, I think it's really, really important for both players and coaches. I find the science side of it is really compelling in terms of trying to sell the story to my players. Player says, my forehand's crap. Okay, great. Give me some evidence behind that. Well, I don't have any evidence. It feels crap. And then I bring up the pure numbers and they look at it and they go, oh, how come I'm winning more points with my forehand and I thought my backhand was my best shot, right? So it kind of like sells this story. And, a lot of players, we all get into our own heads at times, right? We think things are happening, but we're not quite sure. A player comes to me after a weekend. I serve so bad on the weekend. And I give a parent a task every weekend. If any parents are watching this, we generally get very caught up in our players' outcomes. But I give them a task and I say to them, okay, here's your task for the weekend. I want you to chart how many first serves go in, how many points we win, for example. So then when the player comes back to me and says their serve is really poor, I go to them and I see the data from the parent. And the parent gives me the data and the data doesn't match what the kid's saying. And the kid then goes, oh, yeah, but it felt so bad. Yeah, but you served at 65%, and that's the average of what the top 10 players in the world are doing, and you're winning 70% of points. So to me, that's actually serving really well. And they look at me and they go, well, it didn't feel like that. And I'm like, well, that's okay. Well, it didn't have to feel like that. This is what the facts are telling us. So it just takes away that opinion and that emotional state of a lot of people that, we all get emotional about the way we play and we kind of get attached to certain things, and we all have this one shot, all of us, and I guarantee you'll be the same, mehrban. You've got one shot that you think is the worst shot you've got, but if you don't have the numbers behind, it's really hard to create that factual information if you don't have the numbers. So the art and the science is really important to have the blend of the two, and the ability to use the science in the right way. So, I might get information on a player which is mid-tournament that a certain shot is breaking down. And it could be a guy who has a Western grip forehand is getting exposed. They won the match, but it gets exposed on the fast ball. I'm not going to make a grip change mid-tournament. So it's understanding that that's not going to happen. It might mean that we need a tournament break, a block of training to be able to make those changes. But whereas if they're having a really slow start to matches, and I'm seeing the data, so like in particular, one player we had that we charted, he was winning 1.14 games every first 4 games of his matches for the last 12 months. So one game every first 4 games for 12 months. And this was mid-tournament. And we got these numbers back and I was like, okay, we need to change the warm-up routine. Now we changed the warm-up routine mid-tournament. We then implemented it post-tournament and we created a change. That player now wins close to 3 games every first 4 games, every match they play. And all it was a shift in warm-up and pre-match routine. So the science is there, but it's like, when do I implement it and how do I implement it? And they're the kind of things that I think are the most critical for any player or coach is don't just grab the numbers and make change, because change might not be the right time to do that. Make sure you understand when the right times are to make significant changes. And that's the art of combining science and art together.
Fascinating. And just curious, I mean, it's incredible, how you changed the warm up a bit, and then your player went from 1.14 games out of 4 to 3 games out of 4. That's incredible. I was wondering, I mean, what What change was this? I mean, is this something that like most of us, club level players can also change? I'm really curious.
Absolutely. It was all legal, let me tell you. It was all,
No steroids.
it was all above board. But basically what we did was, what I noticed in pre-match warm-ups was, you go and hit before a match and you practice with your mate and then you go play your match. He was actually hitting at a very slow ball speed. But when he went to play matches, he played at a fast ball speed, obviously, because you tried to increase time, lessen the time of the opponent, increase your time of your other end. And he didn't have range. So his intensity in warm-ups wasn't replicating what he wanted to start with in the match. So when he went to the match, he was trying to find range in the match. And I was like, that is not going to happen. So by the time first 4 games started, he started to find the range a little bit, but he's 3-1 down. And that wasn't really a great start for us. So what we tried to do was we increased the tempo of training. We created a point play at the end of every warm-up, and we sped the warm-up up into ball speed. So by the end of the warm-up, it felt like he'd already played the first 4 games and that he was into the match. So by the time he stepped on court, he was ready to go. And that made a significant difference. We changed his eating habits. So I felt that he was, 2 hours before the match, which is what we tell players to eat a big meal, a significant meal. He was eating that, which is great. He'd then have 2 hours, then start his match. And by the time the match would also finish, that's like 4 or 5 or 6 hours by the time he'd eaten anything significant. So we also made sure that every half an hour he had either a muesli bar or a banana or an apple or something to maintain energy storage. So then when he started the match, he was starting a full fuel system, as well as being intense and ready to play. So fuel systems and the intensity were the 2 things that we changed, and anybody can do that. So it's important to understand what you need prior to a match to be able to make significant change at the start of your matches.
Wow, love that. That's really fantastic. Thank you for the insight there, Mark. And you mentioned, I think, was it the parent who was charting the kids match who thought he wasn't serving well, but he actually had pretty decent stats actually. But one question for you is, in what ways can club level players like us utilize I guess data collecting and analysis as well? I mean, obviously you mentioned charting. I mean, are there apps out there? And also I think there are, some sites that you can like submit match footage. So like, what do you recommend for us to explore this realm of advanced tennis statistics?
I think there's a few ways. Obviously, having someone take your statistics is really good. What I actually bought which was really cool, and most tournaments and competitions allow you to film your matches. But if you can, on eBay, I got it for $19. It's not very expensive, but it's kind of like this camera hook that hooks onto fences, and you put your phone in it. Very simple, very easy way to do it. You can take it anywhere you like. It's literally put in your pocket. You can take it anywhere. And I put those on our fences, and we get players to take them with them to tournaments, and we film the match. Once you film the match, download an app, which we've been using lately, which is called Swing Vision. Very accessible to everybody. We put it into Swing Vision. We can get basic stats and data from that to be able to help us to dissect, but also it actually cuts up your vision so you don't see any of the in-between point things. So it's actually watching a 2-hour match in 20 to 30 minutes. So, and we also put it on YouTube as well. So we create a YouTube channel for our players. They upload their matches to YouTube. We have Swing Vision. We put it in there to get the basic stats. And then we also use our data analyst in Shane to be able to help us to clean up the data, to create data reports from it. And it's very, very easy. And I'm talking players that are playing local recreational level as well as performance level. We're doing it at all levels of the game because we get multiple data, multiple things of data. So we've got vision, we've got the data from a numbers standpoint, and then we can get reports and spit out reports from that. So we can have different ways to look at it. And over time, we can see progression or regression, or if someone stagnates, but it gives you measurement tools. So the more you are filming your match, the more you can actually understand what you are doing from a visual standpoint to see it, then from the numbers standpoint to get factual information rather than opinion. And it actually helps you so much more to measure your success rates rather than to guess what your success rates are. Sometimes we win matches because the opponent plays poorly, but yet we think we're playing well. Is it a false sense of reality sometimes, but we need to understand why and how we do things. And a lot of the time we look at data to see why we're losing. Look at data why you're winning. That to me is a big shift that I've made in my coaching in the last 10 years. And it's something that I've learned from the football standpoint is we look at why we win matches, not why we lose matches. And if you look at what your strengths are to be able to use those strengths more often, I think you'd be a better off player than looking at what you're doing really poorly, because it just highlights the fact of those things and gives you more negativity and actually brings you down from a mental standpoint.
Wow. I don't know if you know, Mark, but I've been writing a lot of notes from your responses. So I'm really looking forward to, reviewing and implementing. So, really a lot of great stuff. And I did interview, the creator or founder of Swing Vision. So really fascinating that he came from doing AI at Tesla. And so really great app there. So I guess, in terms of next steps, Mark, I mean, again, like from the lens of a club level player, 3.5 to 5.0 or something like that, like what would you recommend us to do in terms of like, I guess, what data point or a couple of points would you recommend us, look at first that would make like a, maybe one of the biggest impacts in our games that we could then, take action from learning about that?
I guess it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. And that's kind of the when we find our purpose behind everything, it's really important. But with any kind of player, the best suggestion I have for anyone that wants to improve their game is watch yourself play. I think that we can assume things are happening. We can feel things are happening, but until you see it, I think it just makes so much more sense as to why things happen when you see it. If people want to get better, it's not just a matter of going out and just hitting balls. It's like, well, why am I hitting it? What's the purpose behind it? Creating purpose in everything we do is critical. So if you don't quite understand why things are happening, and what are you practicing? Why are you practicing? What is the practice session aimed to achieve? And a lot of our players do the same, very similar levels to what you're talking about. It depends on where you're at in your journey of the game. But our players go and practice for no reason whatsoever, because they're told that they have to practice, because they want to get better, but there's no purpose behind the session. Vision will give you purpose behind the session. You don't have to have any numbers whatsoever. If you see yourself play, I will guarantee you'll pick 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 things that you're like, wow, that's really letting me down. Now, the art of that is to say to yourself, okay, what is the first priority and what's going to give me the most bang for buck? So if for me, I always look at the serve and the return first and foremost. You are always going to serve or you're always going to return. If anything else that you do, I would just not even go past serve and return. If you're not making enough serves or not positioning it well enough, or you can't execute your serve, you're on the back foot straight away. If you're unable to neutralize the rally from the return, back foot straight away. It doesn't matter what happens post those two shots if those two shots are not good enough. So watch yourself play, see what your serves are doing, see what your returns are doing. Are you making an impact? Are they effective enough? If they're not, that's where I would start. And then maybe take some data behind those two areas of the game. From a return standpoint would be, how many returns am I putting in play? And how many times do I get the first strike after that? Am I doing enough with my return that actually gets me into a controlling position? Or am I on defense after that shot? And on the serve, same thing. Am I getting in a position where I get the first strike in the rally? Or are they able to read my serve too easily that they're putting me into defense? And then I don't get first strike. So they're the two areas I would look at straight away, and you can make a massive improvement through serve and return, data and vision.
Brilliant. Definitely hope everybody takes that, that step that Mark mentioned. Really valuable advice again. Mark, you're doing great work, as we mentioned, at the top of the show, specifically as well with Tennis Menu. So I just wanted to ask you about, Tennis Menu is, what that's all about, and, how people can maybe check that out as well if they're interested and found value from this presentation.
Yeah, thanks for your kind words. Tennis Menu is a project that's been going for a long time, and we've gradually really making some massive inroads in some courses, which is something that we changed and shifted our focus to. So we're creating some courses. Our first big one. There's a few smaller ones on there at the moment, so check them out. We've got 900 drills, technical interventions. So if you're looking at improving any kind of technical things in your game, there's 900 interventions there on how you can work on different things. We've got a flexibility program up there at the moment with Limma, with Lauren. She's amazing. We've got a biomechanical pressure proofing your biomechanics. So if you want to improve from a biomechanical standpoint and understand biomechanics, there's a great course on that with a biomechanist that I have in my team at the moment in Nicholas Pasuto. And now we're about to break into, we've always got them going. We're about to film actually next week. We've got a forehand course, breaking down the forehand, breaking down the backhand, breaking down the serve into the nitty gritty with different case studies and biomechanical pressure proofing everything. And then we're looking at also, we've got a sports psych on board who'll have his courses up very shortly, and a nutritionist on board. So if you're looking at, the 1%ers in your game, the mindset stuff, the nutritional stuff, it's going to be a few courses there. And yeah, we're looking at teaming with some different people across the board to work with us to create a one-stop shop to tennis, improving your game, improving your knowledge. There's a lot of free stuff on our social media at the Tennis Menu, all over Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Add us there if you're keen to ask any questions. I pride myself on being accessible. I don't want to be this person on the screen. I'm pretty accessible, and I'll personally reply to you. So most of the replies, or all the replies, you get it from me. It does take a bit of time, but I do reply to every single person and make sure that I help you out. And tennis has given me so much, mehrban, that I want to give back to the game. So, that's kind of why the Tennis Menu's there. And I want to give back to people, and I want to give people an opportunity to learn the game that don't have much around resources in their countries or in their areas. And that's kind of why the Tennis Menu started, and that's why I continue to do it. And it does create a lot less time for me and my family, but it creates a lot of fulfillment and reward, and a lot of giving back, because that's kind of what the game has given me so much. So I want to give back to the game and to the people that want to get better. So check us out and reach out anytime.
Brilliant. It's awesome. Thanks for all your contributions. And just to clarify too, Tennis Menu, to check that out, is that tennismenu.com?
Yeah, the tennismenu.com.
Okay.
Yeah, the tennismenu.com for the website. You can actually, if you go on there on the front page, as soon as you get there, if you just jump on, and you can download a player development recipe. So you can jump on there anytime. All you need to do is put your email in, and you get it's about a 15 to 20 page player development recipe. So just looking at how do you build a game and what are the most important things and so forth. So we've got free blogs on there, podcast, plenty of things on there. So jump on and check it out. And also let us know, give us some feedback on what you would like to see as well. We'd love to create our content based on what everybody wants to learn about. So that'd be cool.
Awesome, sweet. And we'll have the links that we mentioned regarding Tennis Menu below this video. So awesome, Marc. Thank you again for coming on and being with us on the event again. And always a pleasure. And definitely everybody check out the Tennis Menu. Thanks, Marc. Definitely, I'm sure we'll keep in touch, and happy to support anything you're doing. So thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, and thanks for having me. And thanks for supporting what I do and having me on for so many years. It kind of feels like yesterday we started, and it was 7 years later. So it's a credit to you and what you're doing for the sport as well. And hopefully we can continue to impact as many people as we can to continue to love the game and continue to grow it and make it the best sport in the world. So thank you for having me.
Definitely, 100%. Always a pleasure. And thanks, Marc. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. I hope that you really enjoyed this session with Marc Sophoulis. Really great discussion on how to use data to win more matches. And I really would encourage you to check out the Tennis Menu at thetennismenu.com. That's the instructional tennis website that Marc and his team have put together with a lot of great content on there. And also would appreciate if you would leave a review for the Tennis Files podcast if you have not yet. Definitely helps the show be more visible to others, which just helps everybody improve, which is a great thing that you're doing by just spending a minute or a few seconds leaving a review there. And you can do that at tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app of choice that you use to listen to the show. So yeah, appreciate that very much. Also want to leave you with a quote as I do at the end of every show. And this one is by Wayne Dyer. And Wayne said, "If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." Very powerful how you switch a few words around and you have a very profound thought there. But that is definitely correct. Definitely the way you perceive things is huge in, how well you operate, how happy you are and successful you are and so forth. So yeah, really, really great advice there. Thank you, Mr. Dyer. And with that, thanks so much for listening. Definitely looking forward to bringing you more very helpful interviews to help you improve your game and other content. And also looking forward to the summer swing. Wimbledon's coming up. Excited particularly about the City Open tennis tournament that's coming to DC. I guess it's the Mubadala City Open, excuse me. And it'll be a Tour 500 level for both the men and women, so that's fantastic. And US Open as well. So yeah, and just trying to play more, definitely feeling better after my pulling my groin actually. Not super fun, but definitely working my way back. So things are good, and I hope you're doing well. And again, just keep improving your tennis game, whether it's on or off the court, in the gym, wherever, on the track. And with that, I'll see you next time. Have a great one.